So hi everyone and welcome to a new edition of You and My Boro with myself, Scott Wilson and Dom Shaw. It's the summer, but we're finally going to get a bit of news, I think. Rob Edwards on the verge of being announced as Middlesbrough's new head coach. I think we can safely say that. So we'll talk all things Rob Edwards. Why him? Is it going to work? Is he the right man for Boro? All that kind of stuff. Let's go. I'll timestamp it now. We're recording this kind of early-ish morning on Thursday. So I guess we have to start off by saying no official confirmation from the club as yet. Rob Edwards has not officially been named as Boro's new boss, but everything we're led to believe, everything we understand, Dom, is that we're now on the brink of it, aren't we?
Yeah. The indications we got earlier in the week was that it was more likely to be a Friday announcement, or certainly the back end of the week. So it's going to happen, isn't it? Rob Edwards is going to be Boro's next head coach. It's going to be announced before the end of the week. You would then imagine that, or the plan would be that he's going to speak to the press next week, and then the players are due back the week after, maybe back in for testing next week, and then, before you know it, you've got 5,000 fans at Ibrox, and you're well underway, aren't you, for the start of pre-season? But we've said a few times, haven't we? It feels like when you get a new manager in place, you can truly draw a line under last season. And the disappointments of last season. And I think that's going to be the case, isn't it? I think once the new head coach is in place, you can look forward. We'll obviously discuss now as to why Boro have gone for Edwards. I think it's a really sound and solid appointment. Completely get it. And I think Edwards will come in determined and desperate to prove a point. And I guess to get back to winning ways, which is what he's done for a lot of his managerial career after the difficult way it ended in that third season at Luton last season.
So, I mean, you did a big read yesterday over on the Northern Echo website. If you haven't already seen that, then I'd definitely recommend you have a look at that. Dom kind of outlining why Boro have gone for Rob Edwards, really. And another piece this morning, just kind of profiling him, looking at his career, all that kind of stuff. Definitely get to the Northern Echo website. Subscribe if you can. It massively helps us. You'll get an ad-light version of it on the website. And you'll also get the page turner app so you can have a look at what it looks like in the paper. That's a great little feature. That plugs over. Rob Edwards then. So I think it's fair to say, look, let's not beat around the bush here. Mixed, probably, reaction from Boro fans to us this week. I think there's a sizable core of Boro fans out there who are pretty excited by it. Probably wanted to see Carrick leave. Want to see Boro head in a different direction. More than happy to give Rob Edwards a really good chance. There's undoubtedly a section, though, who seem to be less enthusiastic about it, pointing out the fact that, okay, yes, he took Luton up, 2 seasons ago. They came back down from the Premier League. Okay, you probably get a pass on that. But last season was a car crash, really, from a Luton perspective. It went wrong from the start, and Edwards obviously left. And then Luton eventually went down. So I don't think it's the case that he's going to be coming in on the back foot, but he's going to be coming in to a fan base that's probably split along the appointment. I think that's fair. Now, listen, that happens with every appointment, doesn't it? It's very, very rare you get an appointment that everybody's absolutely fully behind. Football fans like nothing more than a moan. We know that. What do you think of that? What do you think of the fact that he's coming in with opinion, mixed around him?
I think he'll completely understand it. I think he'll completely get that after the way it ended last season, which I think will tap into why, from what we'll gather, and we'll get to it, he is so determined, more determined than ever to not necessarily to prove a point, but to succeed again. Yeah. I think it's interesting, the reaction, because if you were to judge it purely by social media, on there it seems probably overwhelmingly negative. Not all negative, but certainly more so than that. Now, I absolutely don't dispute clearly that there is that feeling out there. And yet, several conversations I've had in the last week or so with fans out and about You Are My Boro watch viewer and listener pulled me in the book last week in Grade 8, and which I'll die on the hill, by the way. They are the best Parmos in Teesside, absolutely class. And we were saying then, I said, then who would be your pick? I think Edwards would be a really good appointment. I had a couple of conversations out and about yesterday. It's the same conversations I've had with my mate when we were around the pool in Maga the week before last. I think, and we'll get to your trip before the end.
Yeah.
I think it's not all of it's not everyone is not against this appointment. Absolutely not. In terms of why some fans might be against it. Well, I understand the concerns about Luton last season. I've had several say to me back-to-back relegations. I do not think it is at all fair to judge Rob Edwards on failing to keep Luton Town in the Premier League. Like, nobody expected him to get there. They made a better fight of staying up than anybody anticipated. They accumulated more points that season than any of the other 5-2 promoted teams have in the last year. I know we've made this point a few times, but Burnley finished below them. Vincent Kompany got the Bayern Munich job. Countless compliments from other Premier League managers that year for the way he'd adapted Edwards to what was a really, really difficult and sobering start, wasn't it? In terms of last year, there's no doubt that was a massive disappointment for Luton. As you say, a disaster of a season. What I'd say in Edwards' defence is he was sacked in January. They weren't in the relegation zone. They were there or thereabouts. They were 20th or 21st. But he was sacked in January, halfway through the season, and they still went down, which I think is indicative of deep-rooted problems or more deeper-rooted problems at the club. Now, that's not to say that Edwards won't take any responsibility for them going down, because he absolutely will. But he clearly wasn't the only problem at the club last season. And the other thing, I think, we've seen it before, haven't we? Maybe not so much in the last year or two or three because of parachute payments and the Gulf. But going back a bit, it was quite common, wasn't it, for teams to come down and just fail to get out of that losing habit that they got into in the Premier League. Sunderland did it. Stoke did it when they came down and were expected to challenge. They didn't go down, but they struggled around at the bottom. And then finally, the point will be, managers have bad seasons, don't they? Sunderland appointed Regis Labrise a year ago on the back of a relegation with Lorient. Managers, like players, have bad seasons. But I think with Edwards, the good seasons outweigh the bad one. And that's what it's been, hasn't it? That, if you look at his managerial career so far, one bad season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there are a lot of mitigating factors behind last season at Luton. Like you say, I think they came out of the Premier League, having been such a surprise package and on such a high. They've obviously building a new ground as well. So the idea that you come out of the Premier League with riches that you can then boost the squad with, which tends to happen with relegated teams, didn't really happen with Luton because an awful lot of that cash has been earmarked for the new stadium. So
infrastructure, yeah.
So that he really had to go back in with a squad that, like you say, was just on its knees in a really bad losing habit. And
the other thing is that they climbed their Everest, haven't they? Those players.
Yeah. I think the whole Tom Lockyer thing was probably a factor as well. I mean, that happens to your captain, and all right, it's easy to say from the outside, well, it happens and you deal with it and you move on with it. But I don't think it's necessarily that easy internally when he's such a big figure. Just one other thing, we'll get to kind of why Boro have gone for him and the positives that we see behind it, because I think there's plenty. One other thing that fans have been saying on social media, I think, is that when Edwards' Luton teams were at their best, they were up and at him, in your face, aggressive, direct, maybe. Boro, obviously under Carrick, were the complete opposite in pretty much all of those things. Now, I think there's definitely an argument. Well, okay, you have to address that and get some players in who are more like that. We'll see what happens recruitment-wise this summer. But what about the argument that how Edwards would probably want his team to play, but haven't got the players to play that way?
Well, Edwards as Forest Green played a lot different to Edwards as Luton. I think Edwards showed his managerial flexibility, really, and his willingness to bend from what would be his ideal when he went into Luton and saw a lot of the good work Nathan Jones had done. and really thought it'd be bonkers to go in and rip it up. I think with a club like Luton, with respect, you also have to be conscious of what they are almost and what their strengths were at the time. And did he go in when Luton were 10th? So they weren't straggling around at the bottom.
No.
Jones had put the foundations in place, hadn't they? So Edwards really had been incredibly naive to go in, I think, and rip it up and start again. What he did do in the Premier League, though, was not completely alter his approach, but tinker with the setup after 3 or 4 games, changed the way they played.
Yeah.
I'd seen some quotes from Jurgen Klopp where he was saying it was, I think the term he used was insane. The job Edwards has done is insane in how he responded to the early setback and changed that. And
yeah, I think that's a good point, because what he didn't do was the Russell Martin approach of we only play one way. I'm not changing anything, which, you know, I think we've seen enough of at Boro in the last 3 years under Michael Carrick to know that that's not going to work. So yeah, I think you're right. I think his flexibility is a big asset.
And I was reading a quote. I was reading a piece yesterday from Edwards going back a couple of years on The Athletic, where he was talking about control. Now, Carrick talked about control an awful lot, didn't he? But Edwards said there's no point in having control for control's sake. You have to have a purpose. And I think too often last season, Boro lacked that. They had control of games, but they could have played for 90 hours, not 90 minutes, and it'd have still finished 0-0, and they'd have still struggled to break down a low block, and they'd have still passed it sideways and been ponderous and lacked the cutting edge and incision. And the other thing Edwards talks about a lot is we're in an entertainment business. We want to entertain. I want the players to be bold. I want them to take risks. I want them to make mistakes. What he seems to talk about a lot is, I will never judge for making mistakes. I will judge for how players react to making mistakes. And it's the same on the pitch. Be brave, be bold. If it doesn't come off for you, then track back and win the ball. You know, react instinctively, get back into shape. Or clearly, the proof will be in the pudding, and we'll see, won't we, in a couple of months' time. But that all sounds to me like what Boro fans were asking for, or what a lot of Boro fans were asking for at the end of last season, when it was ponderous and slow and predictable and boring, to be frank, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, tactically, quite a lot of the time he's played 3 at the back, hasn't he? 3-4-3 was his kind of go-to at Luton. But then there have been times right through his career, as you said, that he's played 4 at the back. He did switch to 4 at the back at various times when Luton were in the Premier League. It feels like where Carrick, and it's easy to draw immediate comparisons and almost beat Carrick down, but it feels like whereas Carrick, we all know, had a system that he was just not going to budge from, and that was it. Feels much more like Edwards will probably come in, have an assessment, see what players he's got, see how he thinks they fit better, and mold the tactics to the players rather than be utterly rigid about how he wants his teams to play, which surely is the right way to go.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in terms of the back three, I mean, you made the point on several occasions last season, didn't you, that clearly the makeup of Boro's squad is going to change. But I remember you saying at the back end of the season that the players, the options there seem to be a good fit to go with the back three and wing backs. Like Neto Borges would be comfortable playing on the left, the back three. Johnny Howson, we don't know what's going to happen there, but if needed, he'd be comfortable playing on the right, the back three. You're not short of centre halves. Fry, Lenihan, Vandenberg. Clearly, then you need specialist wing backs. Is Alex Bangura a specialist left wing back, or do you need to strengthen there? You're going to bring in a right wing back, aren't you? Because you want to strengthen at right back anyway. But I think if you did move to a back three, I don't think the squad's a million miles away from. In fact, I think the makeup's pretty solid to be able to adapt quite quickly. But I do think, like you say, I think he'll come in not with a Ruben Amorim, this is the way I'm going to play, and you will have to adapt. But right, what have I got here? What's the best way to get results in the short term, and obviously then the longer term? But clearly, the first priority is getting results on the board and getting off to a good start, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And what about off the pitch then? Because we know that he has worked with Kieran Scott in the past, and Chris Jones as well. I think it's important to dispel the suggestion that, this is jobs for the boys. They're as thick as thieves. Yes, they've worked together in the past. They're not. Football is a small world. Kieran Scott will have worked with an awful lot of managers at various points in the past. So, I don't think that's a fair kind of rock to throw. But what I do think is that at the very least, Edwards will be coming in with his eyes completely wide open about the way that Boro want to do this and the type of players they want to bring in this summer. And without labouring a point we seem to have laboured endlessly, it did feel like that relationship broke down quite badly in January with the recruitment operation in Carrick. And hence we saw the Ryan Giles signing, we saw the Kelechi and Acho signings, the type of deals that Boro had really been saying that they were going to move away from. And I don't think would have made had it not been January and there were gaps that just needed to be filled. I think what we'll see this summer is back to a much more harmonious idea of what type of players are going to be coming into the football club and everybody back to singing from the same hymn sheet, if you like.
Yeah, I completely agree. January was so muddled, wasn't it? And I think that point you made there about the fact Edwards has worked with Kieran Scott before. I find it pretty baffling, really, that draws criticism because, like you say, this isn't jobs for the boys. Is it not just common sense? Is that not just kind of what happens in any other industry where if you had 2 or 3 people going for a job and there were 2 or 3 people, or you'd shortlisted or you'd got down to the final candidates, 2 or 3. I don't know whether every other industry talks in the nonsense language we do. Shortlisted. But if you had 2 or 3 kind of final candidates for a role and they were all really strong candidates and you were trying to work out between them, but you'd worked with one of them before, and you knew he was a good operator and you liked the way he went about things and you knew there was a good dynamic between you and him, would it not just common sense? Is it not just human nature to lean towards like that anyway? I think like that isn't that just common sense? That happens in every football club, in every sport and in every industry, doesn't it?
And the relationship between a sporting director and a head coach is so vital. It's so integral to the way a club operates that you know, it can't be the only determinant. And I'm absolutely sure that it wasn't the only determinant from Boro. But like you say, if you've got 3 very strong candidates, then it might be a factor that helps nudge one of them over the line. I absolutely see that. Getting back, I do like your idea of primary school unveiling its new head teacher. Or
who can't wait to get out on the playground.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like that.
I think the other kind of myth to dispel really is this idea that it was only ever Edwards and there was no other interviews taking place and they didn't speak to any other managers. They absolutely did. You did the piece you broke the piece last week, didn't you? The final shortlist was Edwards, Steve Cooper and Danny Rowe. They spoke to other candidates as well before that. They spoke to candidates from Europe who'd never managed in the Championship before. But again, I think if you were to whittle it down really, I completely get the appeal with Danny Rowe. I think he's done a great job at Sheffield Wednesday. I think he'll go on to do big things. But there's clearly the complicating factor with Sheffield Wednesday. And Boro aren't the only club to show an interest in Rowe. In fact, there's been several to have shown interest in Rowe, to have held talks with Rowe over the course of the last year, 18 months, and haven't gone for him, which I think is an indication that all clubs realise kind of, I mean, dealing with Chansiri can't be the easiest thing in football, can it?
That's exactly it. Again, there's a notion, Boro we're never going to get Danny Rowe because they just will not pay. They're wanting to do this on the cheap. That's unfair. But Boro were willing to have serious discussions about paying compensation for Danny Rowe. My understanding is that all the soundings they got around that very early were, this is going to be a nightmare for you because Chansiri, look at the mess that Sheffield, look at the EFL charges that have been put out, look at the transfer embargoes that's been put on. What is Chansiri wanting to do with that football club? Goodness only knows. So to then start negotiating compensation for a head coach, probably some of his existing staff as well, which he would want to bring in with him. All the soundings Boro were getting were, you might not have that resolved by the start of the season. Never mind the start of pre-season, the start of the season. Well, let's see if and when a club eventually gets Danny Rowe out with Sheffield Wednesday. But I do understand why Boro were reluctant to get drawn into that. I think Roll was regarded really, really highly within Boro. I think had Danny Roll been available tomorrow, I'm not saying that Edwards still wouldn't have got the nod. I think it would have been a much tougher decision for Boro. It wasn't the fact that they didn't want to pay for Danny Roll. It was the fact that they didn't want to get embroiled in a saga that could have lasted months and months when they're trying to prepare for a season.
And the other factor with Roll, I think, is he has talked openly on an almost weekly basis, really, about his desire to manage in the Bundesliga. Well, what happens if he comes in and he has Boro in the top 3 or 4 in January and a decent Bundesliga job comes up? Like, is he going to be able to turn that down? I think you would have always had that. I think you would have, because he will end up managing in the Bundesliga, won't he? I think you would have always had that hanging over you. And then with Steve Cooper, Cooper, like Edwards, has won promotion. He's kept Forest up, really good record. Like Edwards, a background in player development. But there was the questions, wasn't there? Does Cooper want to return to the Championship? The soundings are that he wants to manage overseas. Well, Boro held talks with Cooper, so there was clearly enough of an interest there on Cooper's side. But again, if he has any reservations at all about wanting to come back to the Championship, do you want to move into that? Or when you've got someone there who you know is desperate to get back in, he's desperate to prove a point, who's achieved in this division before? And I think that's the other thing with like these kind of overseas candidates, the left field overseas candidates. Like, they might have really good coaching pedigree, but if they've never managed in the Championship before, there's no getting away from the fact that that is a gamble. And if you're Kieran Scott, really your legacy at the club might well depend on this appointment. Are you going to take a punt on someone who has no experience of the Championship? Or are you going to go with someone who you've worked with before, you know well, you know how he operates, and he's had success in this division before? For all those reasons, I just think it makes complete sense.
Well, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what he has to say when he kind of conducts his first press conference, when he has his unveiling. which we do expect to be probably sometime early-ish next week. So we'll obviously be there for that. We'll relay everything he's got to say about you, to you rather, not about you. Well, he might have something to say about you, Dom, or Boro fans. I'm not sure.
Rob, what do you make of the You Are My Boro viewers and listeners?
Yeah.
How was Magga anyway before we wrap up?
It was really good, really good. So I went over with a group of us from the village, group of lads, all of a similar age. I've got to admit, we went for 3 nights. We had 1 night in Magaluf, 2 nights in Palmer. That was the right. We're at that stage. Far
more classier than the other.
But a cracking night in Magaluf. My God, it was hard getting a taxi home afterwards. We weren't staying in Magaluf. We were staying kind of halfway between Magaluf and Palmer. And goodness me, if you think it's hard getting a taxi on Linthorpe Road, you try getting a taxi at Magaluf at about 3:30 in the morning. That's a challenge. Yeah.
Boro cars, if Boro cars want to...
Well, do you know, we were just saying, if you ran Boro cars and you were having a holiday in Magaluf, you'd think, do you know what? I can see a little opportunity here. Yeah. Maga cars.
Must be an advertising shout here. We're giving free plugs away, dishing them out here.
Aren't we just left, right, and centre?
Yeah.
We're thinking that there's definitely a business opportunity there. I tell you.
Well, we haven't got any more trips lined up. Back end of the summer for me. Back end of the summer now. Yeah, it's 2 weeks on. I've still felt like I've recovered. Father time beats us all, doesn't it? Christ Almighty, you soon realise you're not 21 anymore. I know I might still look it, but you're not 19 forever, Dom. No, this is true. Well, let's see what the next days, weeks brings for Boro. But when Edwards is confirmed, obviously we'll have all the breaking news and the analysis on the Northern Echoes website. Just to shout again to subscribe. The latest offer there is running across the bottom of the screen. Just £4 for 4 months. We've had a fair few subscribers this week, so thank you to all of those for the support. Massively appreciate it. The same goes for obviously those who subscribe and watch and listen to us on here as well. Keep commenting. We massively appreciate all the comments and the community that goes on beneath there. We enjoy flicking through them. So thanks very much. Keep doing that. And if you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review. And we'll be back next week with our next You Are My Boro. Take care.